And we're back. Hey, what's up? What's up? This is the Fordcast with your stroked out host, that is I, Jim Rico. Listening to the sounds of Public Enemy, which I do not own the rights to this music, but I love PE as my opening. So I'm glad you've come back to sit here and listen for a while to hear what we want to talk about today. And just want to go ahead and say that today's episode is probably the most important episode that I will perhaps do that I can think of. Just with everything going on in the world. I mean, when I started this, when I had the idea to start this podcast and I didn't even have a name for it, it was simply just to reach out to people that look like me from on sides of towns in the world like me, you know, not just Ford Road in Charlotte, North Carolina, but, you know, the Fords in Indiana, New York, Florida. You know, there's a Ford Road everywhere, and there are people that look like me that grow up one way, and, you know, sometimes, you know, things get convoluted in growing up and in your thought processes. But I just wanted to reach out because as I got older, I learned different. You know, I learned there was a better way. I learned that a lot of the things that we had learned and had been exposed to were not necessarily making us successful. And if we tended to focus on the wrong thing, they would actually make us unsuccessful. So the idea of even starting out with this podcast was to, you know, kind of trying to reach back and, you know, kind of just saying, hey, yo, you know, we could do this a little differently. As a matter of fact, we can be a lot more successful in what we're doing. So, you know, that was a few years back, and, you know, that was before this whole political landscape that has changed tremendously since, you know, those ideas first came through. I mean, and I'm just talking about, you know, the first Trump administration, and then the whole January 6th, and then the denial, and then, I mean, you know, if you're like me, then it's a lot to process. And if you don't process it correctly, then it could turn into something different. It could make you want to turn things off. It could make you want to shy away. It can make you lose hope. But I'm here to tell you, you have got to have courage. You have got to have courage, because the power is in you. And we're going to talk about that right now. We're going to talk about this in this episode. Like I say, this is probably the most important episode I will probably ever record. Maybe you listened to the previous episodes and, you know, you kind of heard me talk about this, talk about that, even ramble, for that matter of fact. But everything I've been talking about kind of fits, because we have a problem, you know, in America. We have a problem in America. We have a problem with mental health, and a lot of those problems stem from basically lying. You know, there's somebody very important to me in my life, and she says, oh, everybody lies. And I hate that she believes that, but that is really her truth. And it makes me think back to those tests that you take before getting a job. Have you ever stole a pen before? Have you ever done this? And, you know, I took some of those tests decades ago. And when I was taking the test, I was thinking, my God, who thought up these tests? Are you really mean to tell me there's nobody that has ever stolen a pen before or walked off? Like, it was unfathomable to me. Like, I couldn't believe that there were actually people who had not done that. But here's the reality. There are some really, really good people in the world that try to go about their daily business in life by doing the right thing. They're not just black. They're not just white. They're not just Asian. They're just not Latino. They are people, human beings. And they recognize when other human beings are being mistreated. And like me, people want to step up for those people, And no, we aren't taking any calls right now. So, but just knowing that and trying to continue on about how we go about our business every day with everything going on. I mean, it's crazy. And now here we are into this second administration of Donald Trump, and I get it. People make mistakes, people make mistakes, but I just got to say, with the things that have been told to millions of people and the actions that have followed, I mean, if you aren't mad, if you aren't pissed off that there's a man in the White House who is considered the most powerful man on the planet, if you aren't angry that this guy is up here changing with the wind blows, saying he's going to not do this but turns around and does that, if you aren't angry that that stuff is happening, then something is wrong with you. Something is wrong with you. And you're probably one of the people who did not vote or voted for this guy. And I'm not saying that there's something wrong with you voting for this guy because you're exercising your right, and that's all well and good. But if you didn't vote for this guy and you're angry, then you're part of the problem. And I don't want to sit here and point fingers and blame, but I do want to start out by saying, this year, 2025, it has a number of significances. Is that a word? Significance? I done had a stroke, so. So, occasionally, I will mess up a word. But I digress. Let me pause there for a second. Earlier this week, I had an opportunity to attend a forum. It's called the Sarah Stevenson Forum, and it's held every Tuesday morning forum. And it's held at the Belmont Center here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And this forum used to be held at the West Charlotte Recreation Center years ago. And basically this forum was created by Sarah Stevenson and others to have a place where local leaders could come and speak to the black community about issues. And I attended many years ago at West Charlotte, in and out. And now it has moved, the format has moved to the Belmont Recreation Center. And I just happened to drop in this past Tuesday, and boy, what a treat. Harvey Gantt, the former mayor of Charlotte, was there. Anthony Fox, the former mayor of Charlotte, was there. Now, you know how much I hold dear anybody from the West Side, and Anthony Fox being from West Charlotte Senior High School, also from the neighborhood, off of Batesford Road, otherwise known as the Ford. So I was tickled pink, to be in the room. There were other local leaders there. Braxton Winston was there. I don't think you remember Braxton Winston. David Howard, former councilman. Lee Altman, Dante Anderson, the current mayor pro tem, and even that guy, James Mitchell, he was there too. But just to be in the room with all of these black men, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, and Mel Watt was there. Mel looks so good. Mel is almost 80 years old, and this man looks like he's my age. I don't know if you know Mel Watt. Mel Watt's the former North Carolina legislator, North Carolina senator, but he was in attendance as well. So when I tell you that this city has history, we have some good history with our African-American community and male leaders. We have it, okay? It doesn't look like it now, but we have it. And to be there and to be a part of that discussion, and basically the discussion was about this 1 cent increase, 1 cent tax increase to support the infrastructure for future mobility in this region. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that on another episode. But if you're listening right now and you don't know what it's about, you need to vote yes. Okay? We do things now for the future, just like people in our past did for our current future now. So, I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out there. But anyway, just being there in that room with all of these men, I'm pretty sure that it might have escaped you that Anthony Fox went on to become the Secretary of Transportation in President Barack Obama's cabinet. Okay, truly a great honor for somebody from the West Side. Don't let anybody ever tell you that Beatties-Ford Road is nothing, or that coming from Beatties-Ford Road people do nothing. Okay, because we have great people who come from the Ford area and from all other regions in Charlotte, but I'm from the Ford, so I'm privy to the Ford. So just being in that room, being there in that space, it was tremendous, and I felt really proud to be a Charlottean. I felt proud to be a Black man. I felt proud to be an American, because even though it's even though the dream, and I'm laughing because of the current light of the whole country, sometimes the American dream gets distorted. Ask immigrants right now about the American dream. Ask those who believed in Donald Trump before they voted for him, and ask those who believe in Donald Trump now. So anyway, but truly, this country is a place where, given the right tools and given the right circumstances, given the right help, you can aspire to be anything you want to be. That doesn't mean it's not going to be hard. That doesn't mean it's not going to be difficult, because there are people, as you can see now, who want to change that, who only want certain people to advance. Okay? And that's the problem. That's part of the problem I have with those people, because everybody can contribute. Everybody can contribute to the success. And as a matter of fact, when everybody contributes, we become better. When you have a room full of one race of people trying to solve a problem for a multiracial sect of people, that's a problem, because they're thinking in their own boxes. When you bring somebody from outside the box who has outside thinking, then you're able to get additional thought processes flowing. I'm talking about some serious stuff. Basically, if you have a room full of men thinking about one thing, and you bring one woman in and she poses another situation for you to look at, and all those men start thinking differently, then that diversity has now created successful thought processes amongst that group. That's how simple it is. Listen, if you're not thinking about stuff and you're just rambling on in life and doing, then that's a problem. You got to start thinking. You have to start thinking. We have to start thinking about the things we do every day. It is no longer a situation. Matter of fact, it has never been a situation where the people we elect and put in places are going to do our bidding. It is painfully obvious that people will lie. Trish caught him. Okay? People will lie. Okay? And I knew this would happen, that somebody would say that they're a Democrat and they would run under the Democrat name, and then they would switch over. Trish Cottom did it. She got us. She did it. And there are other people that are doing this too. And you think she was the first to think about this? No. So anyway, let me stay on point, okay? But just this past week, I had that opportunity, and it really just, I couldn't wait to get into the studio to talk about it. because that was the beginning of this month, the month of July. All right. And this month, we're celebrating a lot with this month. So much to celebrate, as always. We're always talking about the 4th of July that we celebrate. But there are a lot of other anniversaries that are happening in 2025 that you may or may not be aware of. We're coming out of the month of June, which is some of you know that we celebrate Juneteenth on the 19th of June, which we celebrated, which was basically, do you really understand what June 19th is? I hear a lot of people saying that's the day the slaves were freed. So let's be clear, okay? Because we have got to get to a place of knowing. We have got to get to a place of knowing and understanding and not just guessing. So June 19th, okay? June 19th was the date that a general from the Army, okay, went into Texas and said, okay, he issued an order, General Order Number 3. And that General Order Number 3 said that we are now going to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation, which Abraham Lincoln had wrote an executive order 2 years earlier. All right, let me back up a little bit. June 19th, 1865, okay, was the day that this general rode into Texas and said, okay, we're going to cut out all this nonsense. The Emancipation Proclamation is 2 years old. We're now about to enforce it. So June 19th was the day that the general order was written, and all the troops were being told and ordered that, hey, wherever you see slaves, you free them. We're going to enforce this in the South and everywhere you go. So that is basically it. That's how June 19th got to be June 19th. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation was issued 2 years earlier in 1863, January 1, which really we ought to be celebrating New Year's Day. Everybody ought to be celebrating New Year's Day as the Emancipation Proclamation, that the day the slaves were officially freed. But it took 2 years later for this guy to ride into Texas and say, you know what, enough of this. We're going to enforce this executive order that the president issued. Executive order, the same executive order that this current president has issued to revoke a lot of things such as civil rights. All right? I'm going to let that sink in, okay? I'll let that sink in, and we're going to be right back, and we're going to talk some more about this. But like I said, this is the most important episode and broadcast of the Fordcast with your stroked out host. That's right, me, Jim Rico. So we're going to be right back. So 3 snaps up, 3 snaps down. Wanna be treated like a king. All right, we're back. We're back here at the Fordcast with your stroked out host, Jim Rico. And let me just say, I do not own the rights to any of this music. My man, Anthony Hamilton, Charlotte's own. Man, Charlotte has a lot to offer. Right before we went to that quick break, I was talking about, breaking down the Emancipation Proclamation and all that stuff from, where we kind of get it confused what Juneteenth was about. So anyway, Juneteenth, June 11th, 1865, was the day that the Emancipation Proclamation was enforced, and June 19th, 1865. So we always look at it as June 19th. But just so that you know, the slaves were freed by executive order written by Abraham Lincoln on January 1, 2 years earlier, 1863. Okay, so let's just make sure we understand that. So we're talking about other things that we're celebrating. July 4th, we celebrate America's signing of the Declaration of Independence. Okay, now these are all things that you can go and look up in your history books. It has been 249 years. July the 4th, 2025. It will be 249 years. Next year, if all of us get to see it, will be 250 years. But this year marks the 249th year that the Declaration of Independence was signed. 249 years that this country officially declared its independence from England. Now you think 249 years, all right? How many people in your family can you go back 249 years? Just based upon your age. You have to go back to your grands, your great-grands, and even before that. But guess what? That's still relevant. Those are people that you can almost touch. You might even have pictures of those people, unless you were African American and a slave or a descendant of a slave like myself. My great-grandfather was a slave. So that means my father's grandfather was a slave. You understand what I'm saying? So that's how close this has been. You know, a lot of time hasn't gone. This country is a young country. And we're going to talk about this. All of this matters. Okay? This is what we're celebrating. We're celebrating this month that it's been 249 years since the Declaration of Independence for this country. Okay? And we're going to talk about how a country declares independence from another country. Think about when you leave home and you want to be independent. You want to declare your independence from your mom and dad. What do you need when you leave home? You need money. You need to be able to survive. You need a viable income. You need some stuff, basically. And America had that stuff. All right? They had that stuff. All right? And we're going to talk about how they had it, which you already know, and how they were able to tell England to go stick it. All right? So, also, this month, all right, we're celebrating 60 years. 1965, in fact. 1965. 60 years ago was when the Voting Rights Act was passed. Civil rights legislation which prohibited discrimination from voting. Look, 60 years ago. 60 years ago. All right. So now there were a lot of civil rights laws passed in the 60s, but this one right here was the last one that really, really created a lot of ripples, because before, blacks had been disenfranchised by having to pay poll taxes. I mean, when I say poll taxes, you would go to vote and, they would say, okay, you got $50, if you were black. And if you didn't have $50, then you couldn't vote. Or a literacy test. You would go to vote and they would say, okay, read this here. And if you couldn't read, you couldn't vote. Now, of course, blacks didn't go to school and it was illegal for blacks to learn. So damn if you do, damn if you don't. Okay, that means it's been 60 years since that legislation was passed. 60 years. And if you're over the age of 60 years and you're responsible for people that are under you, that are of voting age, and they don't vote, that's your fault. Because the significance of that passage, of that legislation, is what allowed us to be able to have a voice or a say in how our country or how our cities, how our states were ran. This was federal legislation that if a state was disenfranchising black people, then the government, the federal government, would come in and do an investigation, which led to gerrymandering. If you don't know what gerrymandering is, it's basically how the lawmakers, state lawmakers, draw up maps so that they could pool a whole bunch of voters who they know are going to vote one way into one spot and pool a whole bunch of other voters that they know is going to vote another way into one spot. Basically, it's a smart way to disenfranchise people. But if you're not voting against putting these people in office who are doing that, then, of course, it's going to be done as it has been done in the state of North Carolina. And we have to fix that. We have to fix it right now, okay? Because the North Carolina General Assembly, which is the legislative body of the state of North Carolina, all right? We're going to learn some stuff here. Like I said, this is the most important broadcast I will probably ever do. But the North Carolina General Legislature is just like the U.S. Congress. The only difference is Congress makes laws for the entire country. The General Assembly makes laws for the state. And when you have people that are in charge of making those laws that aren't making laws in everyone's best interest, then guess what? It's going to be against someone else's best interest. You know. Can you imagine, what's his name? The guy that was running for governor of North Carolina, Mark Roberts. Can you imagine him being the governor of North Carolina right now with this current General Assembly? I mean, this is the General Assembly that has taken the money, your taxpayer dollars, and given it to private schools so that the parents don't have to pay as much. Now think about it. If you listen to a previous show, you know that private schools were created because some parents, white parents, did not want their kids going to school with black kids. And so they started creating private schools. And so now here we are, back fast forward, some 50 years later, now we're giving them money. And if you aren't pissed off about that, then, you got to be dead or something or other. I mean, you got to be. Because if you're alive and you're just walking around and not paying attention to what's going on, then, you're a part of the problem. So let's not be a part of the problem. Let's be a part of the solution. The first thing in solving a problem is knowing what the problem is. The problem is we don't know. And this is how we know, okay? We have to talk to one another, which is one of the reasons I created the show, so we could talk about these things that we aren't talking about, okay? All right, so let me get back on track. I want to stay on track. So 60 years ago, passage of the Voting Rights Act, which people ask, well, why should I vote? What's the point of voting? My God, what is the point of voting? Well, let's see here. There were so many crimes. There are so many crimes that are created every day. And when a crime happens and someone is charged with the crime, the process is, if the crime is big enough, it goes to a grand jury to see if this person is going to stand trial. Because, of course, it's supposedly, you're guilty until proven innocent. But that whole process of going to court, there's a process. And do you know who is on the grand jury? Do you know how the grand jury is selected? From voters. From voters. Like yourself, if you voted. You might not have ever been selected to a grand jury. You might have never been called. But if you're a registered voter, that's how you get to be on a grand jury. Now, for years, for decades, blacks weren't represented by grand juries. Hence why so many criminals have gotten off or weren't even brought to trial. You understand that? They weren't even brought to trial because who was going to find them guilty when you have an all-white jury? You have a case where a white person has done something to a black person, but you have an all-white jury of his peers. Why do you think they get off? Now imagine if that jury pool consisted of some black voters or some Latinos, or some Asians. Do you think they might vote differently? Absolutely. Absolutely. Another reason why we should vote, I don't know if you live off the Ford or wherever you live, but, often I look at the Ford nowadays and I see that very little has changed. Very little. Now, when we elect local officials, people like James Mitchell, and they go and sit on city council and do absolutely nothing for years, and then we have dead trees lining up Beatties Ford Road. I mean, we can't even call the water truck in to water these trees. This is where your votes are going. But we keep electing this guy, We also elected his best friend, Patrick Cannon. You know how that turned out. By the way, he was not at the forum on Tuesday. Thank God. Hopefully he had the good sense not to show up. And wherever he is, we respect him to stay where he is. But the reason you elect these local officials is to get things done locally, in your neighborhood, in your community. And if those things aren't getting done, then guess what? You got to get somebody else in there. You cannot keep electing people who are doing nothing for the community. Now, this guy, James Mitchell, sits on the, I forget what board, but it's supposed to be bringing jobs, and nothing's coming to the West Side. Nothing's coming to the West Side. And we have to start electing people that are actually going to do something positive for the West Side, okay? Instead of encouraging gentrification, which has begun in earnest on the West Side. So people, understand that legislation that passed just 60 years ago, which gave blacks the right and backing by the federal government to not be discriminated against, okay? Not be disenfranchised. That was an important piece of legislation, okay? And there are people who died for that. The reason that a lot of us are here now and able to do things now because we're standing on those people who died. Literally, those people who died, their blood, okay, their bodies are in the streets of sacrifice, and we're standing over them so we can do a little different. Now, are you taking advantage of that? Are you really interested in voting? Of course, I get it. You might not know who should I vote for, or, what is this about? I get that. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that at the end of this. Again, this is the most important episode I'm probably going to do. And I've been tiptoeing around a lot of issues because I didn't want to come out seemingly angry, and because I'm not. I know that there's a lot of hope that has been lost, and a lot of the reasons that the hope has been lost is because so much has happened lately, so much so fast, and that's all part of the design. If you get so much crap thrown at you, in such a quick amount of time, what are you going to do? Oh, Lord, just put my head. You're just going to put your head down, and meanwhile, while you have your head down, stuff is still happening. Stuff is still happening. Stuff is still going on. So we have to get in the game, y'all. We have to get in this game, and we're going to have to play this game, and we cannot ever, ever, ever get complacent again. Civil rights, the passage of civil rights legislation, the election of Barack Obama, we got complacent. We got comfortable, okay? We thought that, okay, wow, we've arrived. Okay, we don't have to, we could. There was a collective sigh that we didn't have to do anything anymore. Boy, were we wrong. Actually, that was when the other people, okay, the people who didn't want these things to happen, that is when they circled their camp. They encircled, what's the term? Circled the wagons. They circled the wagons, and they got to thinking, okay, look at here. Stuff is changing. These people that we had enslaved working for free, that built this economy, they're getting these rights. They're probably going to start asking for reparations. So we have to do something to put this on freeze. So hence you had the Tea Party come up. Then you had the Trumpsters come up. You see how this works? You got to get your head out of the dirt. Okay, you got to get your head out of Facebook. You got to get your head out of TikTok. You got to get your head out of things that aren't moving us forward together. We got to start talking, y'all. We got to start talking. We have got to start empowering our families, our neighborhoods. We have to empower ourselves, Okay, all right. So I don't want to get too far off, but those are just the things that we're celebrating, in July. We're celebrating the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We're just coming out of Juneteenth, and we've got 60 years since the passage of voting rights, okay? So there are lots of things that we're celebrating, but the question is, do we feel like celebrating? I mean, do we really, really, really feel like celebrating? Like, at times it's almost like, oh my God, it's something else. Okay. All right, we're going to come back and we're going to get into some history. We're going to take a quick break. I do not own the rights to any of this music, just so that you know that. But we're going to take a quick break and we're going to be right back. All right, you listen to the Fordcast with your host, Jim Rico, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back here. Thank you for coming back. This is the Fordcast with Jim Rico. That is Erykah Badu. I love me some Erykah Badu. And just let me let you know, I do not own the rights to this music. So, like I said earlier, this is probably the most important episode I'm probably going to do. And, if I don't do any other episodes, I'm going to make sure this one is done right, okay? Because it's not that much, even though it seems like a lot. But if we all decide to get aligned in our thinking and our acting, okay? If we all decide to get aligned in our thinking, that doesn't mean you have to think alike, but that means you do need to think, okay? And if we could all align our acting, meaning we all need to act accordingly, then a lot of these things, man, we could change this country like instantly. And when I tell you we need to change it instantly, like we need to start now, because 2026 is the next 4 years. The next 4 elections are tantamount to changing the whole narrative of how this country is going. I mean, I agree with some of the things that some of the politicians want to do. I don't agree with all of them. But stealing, I don't appreciate a president coming into office and his family getting rich off of Americans. I don't like that. And if you're an American and you think that that's okay, then shame on you. Shame on you. We need people to start just being honest about their intentions. Okay, we've got a president that has been convicted of crimes. He's a felon. As much shit as I've done, I'm not even a felon. You know what I mean? And then I get people looking at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, well, why are you looking at me like I'm the president? I mean, are you serious? This guy is a felon. This guy was talking about groping women's genitalia. Okay, like it's okay. All right. This man was talking about injecting bleach to cure COVID. I mean, this guy is in his home state. They have just completely disowned him. Can you imagine? Can you imagine North Carolina disowning Michael Jordan? All right, Michael Jordan, one of the most famous guy on the planet. Can you imagine North Carolina disowning Michael Jordan? Well, the state of New York has disowned Donald Trump. But we've got the rest of the country, and these are the people that are voting, okay? These are people that voted for him that are not convinced that this guy is not a criminal, or they're convinced that he is a criminal, but they don't care because he represents their interest. And their interest is keeping their foot on people's necks and holding things back, not making things fair, equitable, and equal, okay? You do know most of his base is undereducated, is not educated, okay? And they're trying to continue doing more of that with this administration, closing the Department of Education. Look at here. If you're uneducated, how are you going to know who to vote for? See there? See there? Ignorance. Remember that word we talked about some episodes about? that gets people's skin crawling? Ignorance. Well, if you're ignorant, you're just ignorant. You don't know. And we have a lot of ignorance, okay? There's a lot of ignorance in this country. There's a lot of ignorance. There was a lot of ignorance with African Americans and who we were. Remember, they said we couldn't do this. We could. I'm a big sports fan, so do you remember when it was a big thing that a black man couldn't quarterback because he couldn't think? Or, here, I'm a big tennis fan. When Serena and Venus came up in the tennis world and they were taking it by storm, there were commentators who used to always talk about mental fitness, that they didn't have the mental fitness, basically saying they were not smart enough to be able to go and, keep their composure. Well, we see how that's turned out. All right. Golf. Okay. Tiger Woods, which we half-ass, claim him. But, ignorance. And people promote ignorance continuously over and over and over. You yourself, you might be promoting ignorance, talking about something that you don't know about and telling other people. That's promoting ignorance. We got to stop doing that. We have really got to do something different in this country. We have got to start educating our young people the right way. We have got to stop educating kids just in the private school sector. If you're a working class person and your kid doesn't go to private school, then you should not want your tax dollars going to private schools. Private schools were created by those people so that they had the money to create the private school. So why are we giving them extra money to take away from the kids that can't go to private schools? And the hell with those vouchers. What's a voucher going to do when you got to get off from work and make sure they go? There's no buses that are going to go. Listen, people, listen. Ignorance. You got to stop claiming ignorance and start getting to know. I know it might hurt to learn a little bit. I don't want to learn. Even my mother sometimes. Can you just tell me? No, Ma, I'm not. Why don't you read it? It's right there. Okay? Now, my mother is from this pre-segregation generation, okay? She's from this generation where either you were in the fight, okay, or you weren't in the fight. Just like now. Some people vote, some people don't. But back then, it was about trying to get rights, trying to secure equality. And there were some people who were in the fight, on the ground level. We know who they are because their names still hold true. The Martin Luther Kings, the Marcus Garveys, the Malcolm X's, the everybody that talked about equality and fairness that was murdered. All of those people, today we're standing on what they did. So my mother and people like my mother, they were either in the fight or they weren't. And if they were in the fight, then more than likely they taught their children how to fight as well. And vice versa, if they weren't in the fight, if they were just out partying, okay? And excuse my language, I'm not going to say that because somebody, but screwing and doing. I'll just say that, partying and screwing. There were some people that were partying and screwing. Oh, I don't have to do anything. I can do this. Other people, letting other people worry about it. Then your kids are partying, screwing, and doing now. Okay? We have to be more responsible for our rights and privileges that others have fought and died for. Okay? We have to be more. So being ignorant in 2025, it has no place. It has no place. You, with all of this information you have at your fingertips, there's no reason that you should be ignorant about anything. If all you do every day is going and looking up what P. Diddy is doing and your favorite rap artist and your favorite movie star, then you are being ignorant. That is ignorant behavior, and you have got to stop it. You need to learn something that you did not learn the day before that is going to help promote you, your family, your neighborhood, your city, this country. Because there are other people with a lot more means, okay, a lot more resources that are desperately trying to keep you ignorant. They're trying to keep you worrying about just that. The next Air Jordans that are coming out, or the next handbag, or the next set of red bottoms. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So anyway, all right, let me die. All right, so what I want to jump into now, and I knew that this episode was going to take two parts. I knew it was going to take two parts because I wasn't going to be able to get it all done in one. So, like I said, this is the most important episode I'm ever going to do with the Fordcast right now, currently. And we're going to have a part one and part two. This is the part one, okay? But what I want to go ahead and definitely jump into is we want to talk about the history, the Declaration of Independence that the United States sent England, how they were able to declare themselves as an independent country. Now, a lot of these things you know and you're aware of, you know, because they're in your history books or whatever the history books wants to tell you, you know, the whole Christopher Columbus discovered America. Don't know how you discover something that is already there that the Indians had been, you know, utilizing for decades. But that's what we were told, right? 1492, the Pinta, the Inca, the Santa Maria, all those, right? But so let's just go ahead and say from 1500, okay? So from 1500 to 1776, which is when we wrote the Declaration of Independence, that was 276 years, okay? 276 years since Christopher Columbus, quote, discovered, end quote, America. So in those 276 years, in order for this country to build itself up to where they could say to England, go screw yourself, we're not going to send any money back over to you, okay? Now, mind you, these were people that left England because they were being persecuted for whatever reasons, whether it was religious, whether it was because they were not white enough, you know, or, you know, whatever the reasons that they left England to come over here and establish these original 13 colonies up and down the East Coast. Okay, they left and came over. They came over, they encountered these Indians, and of course they brought with them disease and killed a lot of the Indians, but they realized as they went further south that this new land, wow, as beautiful as it was, man, it was hard. It was tough. And with the few slaves that they brought, now here we go, we're talking about slavery. Okay, because slavery has been around for thousands of years. Understand, all right? Slavery has been around for thousands of years. With every country on earth, there has been slavery that has been a part of the growth of that country, because usually when countries war, the prisoners are taken as slaves and they put the prisoners to work for the benefit of the good, right? So this country, all right, was one of the first countries that they took slaves just to build the country. And what they did was they put in an order, an Amazon order for slaves. Hey, keep them coming. Hey, keep them coming. Bring them up, as many as you can get, because we want to put them here. We want to put them there. And as the slaves came and they were brought here, realized that they could turn this plant that had these cotton-like fibers into an actual commodity. And cotton was born, y'all. Okay, now if you think about it, you go to your biblical and all the aspects, you know, goods and all that stuff that they traded, usually they were always things and threads and cloths and whatnot. Well, cotton changed the game. Cotton completely changed the game. You think about anything you wear now, or undergarments back in the day, cotton was the basis of it. And cotton put America in the game. You know, all these cotton farms, cotton plantations up and down, and all Americans did was keep producing cotton. Well, as this cotton kept being produced and America was starting to export this cotton back to Europe, not just England, but to Spain, to France, to all these other established countries that were there, all right, to Germany, right? Cotton, and it was so much, and there was so much demand for this cotton that the American dollar quickly grew and outpaced anything. Of course, we all know that precious metals were the staple of the time, but how do you think we got Fort Knox? Well, what happened was people wanted to start paying in their own types of money, and it was like, no, you're going to have to change that to dollars. Well, how do we do that? Well, you give us some certain amount of gold, and they will give you dollars for your gold, all right? So that's what countries started doing. They started paying in precious minerals, okay? Which is why we have so much gold here, because it helped create the dollar, all right? Now, mind you, as this thing grew and grew and grew, other countries were beginning to X out slavery. You were getting people that were saying, hey, listen, it's wrong how you're treating those poor blacks. Because understand, slavery, there was nothing nice about slavery. I think here I have a quote here from this guy. His name was Thomas Roderick Dew. And his quote says this: "A merrier being does not exist on the face of the globe than the Negro slave of the United States," end quote. And I'm laughing because this is one of the stupidest quotes I have ever in my life read. So obviously this guy was not a Negro slave, okay? Obviously he was someone that wanted to convince other people that slavery was not bad, okay? And so what you had was, when you had the world looking at, I'm gonna need y'all to know that I'm in a recording session and don't call me, okay? Okay, all right, I should have turned that off. But basically, you had a group of people who were benefiting from slavery that were trying to convince the rest of the country, or what little bit of country we had then, that slavery was not this bad thing. Okay? Now understand how slavery worked. Okay? Slavery worked by effective slavery, okay? Effective slavery, because you can enslave your neighbor, but all they have to do is run away and run right back home, right? And they're good. So what you had to do was you had to go bring people from far off to where they couldn't run away, okay, easily, and go back. And then you had to have people that didn't necessarily blend in, so other people would know that, hey, they're not supposed to be here, okay? So the Africans fit the bill. They fit the mold perfectly, okay? So these boats, or these slavers, okay, these people who would go to Africa and capture these slaves, along with Africans' help. Okay, now let's talk about that, because you'll hear a lot of people, well, blacks helped enslave blacks. They absolutely did. So the continent of Africa, okay, featured all types of people of color. Okay, all types of people of color. Some people were lighter, some people were darker, some people were bigger, some people were smaller. And then there were some people who were bigger than most, okay? And in order to make that trip from Africa to the United States, okay, that final passage, as they called it, you had to be strong. You had to be a strong African. So I just want to let whoever you are, if you are a person of color, I want you to know that your history comes from a place where you were the strongest of the people that they could possibly find. You come from strength, because if you were weak, then you would die on that trip. They needed you to be strong in order to make that journey, lying down on your back, shackled, laying in your own piss and defecation and others' piss and defecation to survive that trip and then get here and then go to work in the fields, okay? That's where you come from. People of color in America, they are descendants of slaves. You wonder why you have this feeling of pride and of strength, inner strength, but you don't know what to do. Well, that's because it is in you. They had to pick the strongest Africans in order to survive. And then once they got here, of course, they wanted us to procreate, okay, to screw and have sex and make more strong Africans because we were considered property. Just like livestock, we were considered property. And the more screwing, the more babies, the more property. More money, more money, more money. Okay? So this business of slavery, it was just that. Okay? And so as America, as the South grew, okay, because of the plantations, okay, and they were able to export this money, okay, they were able to export this commodity, cotton. The money started rolling in. And oh, did the money roll in. Listen, 276 years since I'm doing hand quotes, since Columbus discovered America. In 276 years, this country was able to go to the country that had paid for their exploration and say, you know what, we're not going to do anything else. We're not giving you any more money, okay? And they knew that they could do it because they had the backup to go with it. They had bought guns. Where do you think this money came from? I mean, how do you think people come over here and discover a place and then all of a sudden get rich? They had to start doing business with other countries. That's how your tariffs got started, okay? That's how the Fort Knox. I mean, if you think about it, and you got to think, there's no time for you to not think about this stuff anymore because this isn't hard. This isn't hard to put together, okay? But that is how this country was able to rise up so quickly. You look at China. China's been around for thousands of years. Great Britain, Europe, they have been around for hundreds and thousands of years. Not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds. I'm not sure the whole start, but thousands of years these countries have been here. And America, the new kid on the block, pops up. Oh, yo, hey, we got something for you. We got slaves that we don't have to pay. And they are producing like crazy for us. So if y'all want your cotton, you come over here and get it, or we'll bring it to you. But you're going to have to give us what we want. And the only way we do business is with the American dollar. So whatever you got, you bring it to us, and in turn, we'll give you dollars. You know? This is true stuff, y'all. This is true stuff. All right, so I'm going to pause right here. We're going to end this part 1, and we're going to come back with part 2 because I know you need to think about this. Again, this is the most important episode a couple of episodes that I'm going to do. And, I just really hope that you guys understand that, where we are right now, we can't afford to be ignorant anymore, which is why I'm talking about this. All right. We don't have any more time to be ignorant. You have got to stop talking about what you hear, and you got to start investigating. You got to start talking to people. You got to start using your phones and not just going to those sites that are promoting different stuff. But anyway, we're going to break it off right here. We're going to come back. All right, we're going to come back with our next episode. We're going to pick up where we left off about this whole slavery thing. And then we're going to talk about exactly what we can do together right now, today, in order to change this whole thing, because the only way it's going to get done is by us doing it together. That is the only way it's going to be getting done the right way. Okay. This is the Fordcast with Jim Rico, and I am just really, really happy and blessed that, I'm an American. I'm happy and blessed that I'm a human. Okay. And as a human American, I don't like what's happening with our government. I don't like what's happening with some of our people looking at other people and deciding that, you know, they're better than other people, because we're all human. We all bleed blood. If somebody's bleeding something else, then we need to know. Okay. But this is the Fordcast with Jim Rico, and we'll be back with the next episode. All right. As your man, I've held your hand.